Okay, so now I want to talk about what happens if you import a template and your images do not show up. Now let's actually, I'm actually in the template builder in Impact, and I'm going to choose a page template that I just imported. And just like the previous videos, this is actually the same template without the images showing up. So if we actually go to Show Template Options, I'll show you what's going on. Now, if you go to one of the background sections, you'll see that under image, there's an actual relative URL pointing to the image. A relative URL is relative to a certain part of your domain. So in other words, in this case, it's relative to the root of your domain. So if you exported a file from example.com and then you import it into another site that's the root of a domain like mysite.com, then it should work just fine because the URL wp content / uploads / so on and so forth will be relative to the root of any domain. But the problem that can occur is if you are exporting from a subfolder, say example.com / impact, or and then of course you're importing from just the root of a domain, or the opposite, you export from the root of a domain like example.com, but then you import into a subfolder site like mysite.com / blog. So the point is it's got to be relative to the same type of location. Okay, so right now, some of you are going to be totally, thinking, oh, that makes sense. And some of you are going to be completely confused because it is a little confusing. So let me actually give you a real-time example. As you can see, this URL says /impact / WP content. Okay, the / WP content bit, that's the beginning of the relative URL as it should look if it were focusing on the root of a domain. But I actually had exported this from a site that was installed in a subfolder called Impact. So it's basically adding that subfolder into the relative URL. So the only way that this would work would be if I transferred it to a site that had a subfolder called Impact. So if, for example, in this case, because the site I'm working on is just a root domain, it's mysite.com, all I have to do is go in and just get rid of that subfolder name in the URL. So if I, for example, delete that, and of course nothing changes until you actually click out of it to trigger the change. But now you can see there's the shadow effect from that background image. And if we go to the header background, we'll get rid of that / impact, delete, click outside of it, and as you can see, there's the header. And we can just run through and do this with all the other images. And there's the footer, and then the title area. We'll get our logo in here. And there it is. So as you can see, the images had transferred, everything was fine. The only difference was that that we just had to adjust the URL. And of course, if you had any custom CSS that was pointing to a URL, you may or may not have to adjust that as well, depending on the specifics of your site. But that's pretty much it. The flip side would be that let's say you exported it from a root domain like example.com and you imported it into a site, it's called mysite.com / impact. Then you would actually go in here and do the opposite. Instead of removing impact or whatever the subfolder was named, you'd actually have to go in here and add / impact or / whatever the name of that subfolder is. And by doing so, then you would be adjusting that URL, that relative URL, to work with your current site that you imported your template. So, like I said, it can seem a little confusing at first, but if you actually are in a situation where you're transferring through different sites and you have the subfolders in one and not in the other, it'll make a lot more sense, especially once you go in and either add or remove that subfolder and see the image pop up once you make the correct change. So like I said, as long as you go from the same type of relative location to the same type of relative location from the import and the export side. You shouldn't have to do this. This is not something you'll have to do on a regular basis. But in unique circumstances, you may have to adjust your relative URLs to get your images to work. So anyway, guys, that's it for the import-export function, the basic how-tos. And if you have any trouble, just post your question in the Impact forum, and we will be happy to assist. So have a great day, guys.